Gail, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? Good to see you, Justin. Of
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I can't complain. I want to say first, thank you so much for taking the time to talk
course.
with me today.
Of course, no, my pleasure. And kudos and shout out to our buddy Rick Hepburn
Yes.
for connecting us. He's an amazing banker on the West Coast, and I really appreciate him putting us together here. So thank you,
Yeah.
and happy Friday, right?
Yes. Happy
Yeah,
Friday. And,
yeah,
and the feeling is mutual.
and happy Juneteenth. We got to get
Hap-
to it, right?
Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Thank you
yeah,
so much. This is
yeah.
awesome. For those who don't know, this is Gail Covington. She's a senior vice president, family wealth director over at Morgan Stanley. And she has an incredible background, which we'll get into discussion here. But again, you guys are in for a real treat. So to kick it off, how does the daughter of a brick paver become the SVP of Family Wealth Director at Morgan Stanley?
Wow, thank you. I'm delighted to talk about my dad. You're talking about my dad who Benjamin Covington left home at the age of 15, hit the road and worked as a lineman, learning to lay bricks. And only later did I really begin to unpack what it meant for the Great Depression to come through, wipe out a lot of jobs. A lot of the black men couldn't get jobs, and so they had to leave and go north, which is what my grandfather did. And as a result, my dad, who was one of five boys, with his mother, left home early, and it was just the pragmatic reality. And he learned how to use his hands, and it wasn't until several years later that his mother wrote him and said, Garner, which was what they called him, it's time for you to come home and go to school and get your education. And I'll tell you that my dad knowing how to lay bricks became the foundation of a lot of stories, a lot of our life, but a lot of what we learned as kids as well, which is how to be handy, how to be unafraid of hard work and things called elbow grease. And, um, one of the things that my dad was really astute at. He went to college and he was on his way to the seminary and decided that wasn't really the path for him. He ended up studying biology at a college called Livingston, and ended up, studying biology and ended up going to Meharry and becoming a surgeon. And,
Wow.
I've just, forever have been enormously in awe of, my dad, his career, his legacy as a distinguished surgeon in the Bay Area, here in Oakland and in Berkeley. But he was also very much a student of how to gain wealth and how to save and how to invest. And he may have come from extremely modest means. And my dad had this way of talking about replacing a piece of cardboard in your shoe, right? When your shoes got worn. And these
Yeah.
were some of the stories around the table. He also talked about this thing called fatback, which was the underbelly of the pig, and how that was considered the prime choice of meat for he and his brothers. And he, told us those stories in order to inspire us to work hard. But one of the things that my dad was extremely observant was how people around him were in different circumstances and what they did with their money. And there was this thing called investing in the stock market, and there was this thing called investing in real estate that my dad became very focused on. And those were just some of the lessons. And so, when I was in high school, he and I took an investment course together, and kind of the rest is history. Yeah.
I love that part. I mean, I think we shared with our previous conversation, you shared about that investing class. And I was like, wow, that's incredible that you and your dad were both in this class learning together. And I guess it kind of alludes to the second question, which is, were you always interested in finance and investment banking?
Yeah. I'll tell you, no, I wasn't. Not at all, not by a long shot. And the example that was set out in front of me was, this thing called medicine, and medicine was, about healing people. And for a long time, I thought that I was destined to become a physician and potentially a surgeon. And I'll tell you this, and I hope I don't get too choked up about it because it seems like I do every time I tell it. One of the most important things that my dad conveyed and helped me to develop, my mother included, right, was this sense of self and this sense of confidence. And my mother used to say, make sure you take advantage of every opportunity. Juneteenth is especially relevant for my mom because she is from Texas, and so I feel like I'm a Texan. But my dad, when he was a surgeon, he became head of surgery, chief of surgery at Herrick Hospital in Berkeley, right? And he also was on the board of the hospital. But as head of surgery, he had a fair amount of authority and independence in terms of how he kind of made decisions. And when I was 8 years old, I told him I wanted to see him do a surgery, and he put me in scrubs and put me up on a high chair, and I watched him perform a gallbladder surgery.
That's
And
incredible.
it's a good thing there wasn't HIPAA back then, and I'm sure it probably broke some rules, but I was 8, and that's how much confidence my dad had in me. He trusted me enough to know how to act appropriately, know how to sit quietly. He trusted that I wasn't going to pass out, and I just really appreciate that we had that together, and it was always one of the core memories. My dad was born in 1922. We lost him a few years back, and he's somewhere fishing full time because that was what he was equally passionate about, was fishing and going all over the world to catch the big ones, as he used to say. So no, it was not always in the cards, but by the time I started really thinking pragmatically about what I wanted to do, it was really finance and coming for a career on Wall Street.
That's an amazing story. I'm trying to figure out myself as a kid, if I was sitting in surgery, if I would be like, "Oh, this is so cool," or like, "Get me out of here." No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It kind of gives a good sense of like, where you've come from and how far you've come. And part of that as well is like, so you went to Williams College, and then you go to HBS. Was Harvard always the goal?
Yeah, I'm not embarrassed to admit that it wasn't. As a high schooler thinking about college, I had a brother, my big brother, Ben Jr. He was at Yale, and he said, if you're interested in a small college, there's this school called Williams, and I credit my brother for introducing me to Williams. And in fact, my 18-year-old is on his way there in the fall, so I'm tremendously proud that we're going to have a fellow EAF and Purple Cow in the family. Because let me tell you, it's hard to get kids to go up into to the Berkshires, especially. It's a little bit remote and outside of Boston. But when I was in high school, I was really interested in a small school, and I thought Harvard, wasn't quite sure I belonged there. The name seemed a little intimidating. But let me tell you, after working a few years on Wall Street and thinking about going back for my degree, I was really, really clear that I wanted to go to Harvard, and applied, and that was it. And so one of the best decisions that I've made in my life, and have long friends, friends over the years that I'm still in touch with, and just a tremendously fun program. I also traveled quite a bit when I was at Harvard, and I went to Asia and went to Europe a couple times with friends, and it just opened up a lot of opportunities for me. So.
That's awesome. I'm over here at Michigan Ross, and now that hopefully the pandemic has hopefully passed us, I hope to do some of the same things in terms of traveling. So all those sounds great. I'm super jealous and hope to take up on some of those as well.
Definitely. Those spring breaks are just precious, right? So make sure you, yeah,
De-
strategize. Yeah.
Definitely will. So you worked at both Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. What do you feel like has been your secret sauce to rising up the corporate ladder at two of these prestigious financial institutions in the world? As a Black woman.
Mhm. No, thank you. I think it's a great question, and one that definitely needs to be shared. There are a lot of reasons to doubt oneself when you walk into corporate America, right? You don't necessarily see a lot of folks who look like you. You might see folks come in, but they don't stay, right? You don't see them being promoted, and it is hard to see examples of success, and it is easy to lose your way, right? And I think that if anyone is strong enough to get through the recruitment process, right, and have the background and the academics, they deserve to be there, right? And I think firms nowadays are much more attuned to what it means to be proactive in developing a pipeline, cultivating. But it's not only on the firm. Importantly, um, one coming into a corporate environment, whether it's a Goldman or a Morgan or any of the other large firm, it's really important to have a personal board of directors. Right? And a personal board of directors is kind of your trusted confidants that you go to for advice, good, bad, or ugly, right? And that is super, super important, right? It's also important to have both a mentor as well as folks who, mentors plural, right? So not just one, mentors, and also advocates, right? And importantly, those folks who are your mentors should not necessarily be just like you. You should not seek out advice and counsel from folks who necessarily are all Black or all women, right? And I really give credit to having heard this in a woman who is a friend and fellow colleague, Carl Harris, who's a vice chair of the firm and who came out with these pearls of wisdom years ago. And it made sense to me, and I've never forgotten just the way she framed it. But I think having mentors and advocates, folks who will carry your good work and your name and your reputation and tout your praises, you need folks who are like that. And you also need folks who you can say, I really messed this up. I don't know what I'm doing. What do I do next, right? One of the biggest positive lessons that I learned was developing a friendship with a senior managing director at Goldman who he and I couldn't have been more different, right? And the thing, and I wrote him a note, and as I left the division in banking and I moved to switch divisions to the investment management division, and I said that I really appreciated our professional friendship. I appreciated that when we first met, it felt like things only divided us, and that was, our races as well as our genders, but our politics as well. And I told him that with just heartfelt clarity, that I appreciated that he had become a confidant and a guide and a mentor. And that for me was a real moment of professional growth. And I think that everyone should be thinking about how to grow professionally, not just stay in a narrow comfort zone, because that's where you do your best growing and thinking, and we got to put ourselves out there.
I absolutely love that. I think that's something I would definitely take note of as I continue my professional career, like continue to put people in as mentors or as colleagues that are opposite backgrounds, different viewpoints as I am, that can help me continue to grow. I think a lot of times, even when I was having mentors, a lot of those people were just like me and maybe were saying the exact same things that I wanted them to hear versus giving me information that I could run with.
Sure, for sure. No, I mean it's easy to live in an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
I mean we're living through kind of a very divided nation, and we know how problematic it is. And one of the things that we know for people of color And part of the key reasons we have suffered in corporate America is because we don't get the advice that we need, right? And sometimes someone who is different than us, they might be senior than us, they don't reach across the aisle and say, here's what you needed to have done differently, right? Here's next time what you need to do better. And so it's up to us to invest in those relationships so that we can get the feedback. And there are a whole host of reasons, right? And when people are different, it's easy to think that the divide is just the divide and nothing can bridge you. And what gets lost is your humanity, and the fact that folks can be as coachable as the next, right? But there needs to be a basis of relationship and trust so that you can go and say, can you help? I'm stuck, or for the person to reach out and say, okay, here's what you should have done differently, right?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned the personal board of directors, so it kind of is a great segue to my next question, which, you recently posted an article about women attaining a seat at the corporate board table. I realize this is really important to you. So what does board service mean, and why is it important?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I posted that, and there is a tremendous conversation that's happening around boards at the moment, and I had been a part of several really esteemed nonprofit boards for some 20 plus years, and currently I'm on the board of the San Francisco Symphony. I'm part of the executive committee. I run the nominations and governance committee, and it's just been really a pleasure to work with the board. I'm a musician by training, so it comes to me naturally. Years ago, actually, when I was a kid, I played for the San Francisco Youth Symphony, so I was that 16-year-old playing a violin and running around everywhere, playing and performing, and the symphony was part of what I did. So years later, they asked me to be a part of the board, and it's an opportunity to really help guide, to be a fiduciary steward on behalf of the institution, to really think about the future, protect the endowment assets, and to really help with strategy. And so that's been very meaningful for me. The thing that I'm equally excited about is the opportunity for underrepresented folks to serve on private and public company boards. And we know that there is a robust conversation right now about what it means to lead. Management teams are thinking very differently about who's in the C-suite. They're thinking about their board of directors. The data is there. We've seen it over the last decade, that when you have diverse teams, when you have diverse boards, you have better outcomes for employees and for shareholders. And so I'm really excited to message this out, through social media. A number of my clients as a wealth advisor are on boards, and they're circling back with comp packages, with restricted stock, with stock options, and they are asking questions about how to raise their game, how to be a part of these board discussions. And one of the things that we know, and part of the reason why it's been so difficult for boards to become more inclusive racially, is because the positions are highly coveted and the turnover has historically been very, very low, right? And one of the things that we know is, even though there are great search firms, a lot of the networking is done just word of mouth, and it's based on the connectivity between two people and a person who will share with everyone they know, I'm interested in a board spot, I'm ready, right? So the sort of, I'd say, a couple of points of wisdom here are, make sure that if you're ready, that you get the coaching, because a resume is not the same thing for a board search, right? And the way you put together that is very, very different, and it needs to speak specifically to the board position that you're after, the independent director position. Number two, tell everyone that you're interested, right? So work your network, right?
Right.
And number three, make sure that you're leading with three highlights of your strengths and what you can deliver to the board, right? So anyway, it's a great time to see these conversations happening among a number of my Black clients. They're having these conversations. It's just a wonderful time, and we're bringing clients together to help them to be even more ready.
That's incredible. I think out of all the questions I had lined up for you, that was the one I was the most intrigued about asking, because I think that's like definitely one of my like bucket list kind of things, and I think a lot of young professionals, especially in the MBAs, are definitely thinking about that. And so the fact that you're able to address it and kind of give us a blueprint, I think is going to be really critical. So
Absolutely.
again, thank you, thank you.
And can I actually, Justin, mention one last thing? It used to be that, the thinking was, well, you need to do 25, 30 years of corporate work before you're even ready for board service. And, we know that it's not accurate anymore, right? Many companies want to hear from younger board members, and making sure that they are, listening attentively and deeply to community and different stakeholders, younger, middle age, older, right, is all part of it. And so there are some tremendous resources out there. In Santa Clara, for example, there's the Black Corporate Board Readiness Program. I've been a speaker. Deloitte runs a great program. There's Him for Her, which is a great nonprofit resource. Chief is another for women. Anyway, there are a number of resources that are out there that are trying to get folks ready for that service.
That's awesome. And the best part too is that you get to do it at a place that you were once performing at. So I know that there's a love there for sure. So this kind of goes into my next question here. How are you advising people to think differently about their career and leveraging their experience and skills?
Sure. It's interesting. So I advise clients about money, right, and about the financial markets. But one of the things that I also tell, especially new clients, is that I am going to ask them about their career, and I'm going to ask them if they're happy and what their long-term ambitions and goals are, because I need to know whether they are going to become an entrepreneur, whether or not they need to save money to start a new company, or whether or not they intend to go work for a nonprofit. And all those things really, really matter. So for me, if I do my very best job, together with my team at the Covington Wealth Management Group, doing that discovery, then it's going to matter in terms of the recommendations that we're going to provide for a client. And what I would say is, long gone are the days where you needed to pick one thing and that's it, right? We know that you have these sort of lifer careers where someone spent 25 years at one company, and those are really exceptional, but they are the exception at this point, right? And particularly out here, in the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley, where folks seem to know exactly when their last set of options vest or their RSUs vest, and suddenly they start thinking about what is their market value, right? And they kind of test it by, accepting, maybe an interview. And so I would say there's a real need for pragmatism, not only about one's skills and development and what they think they're ready for in terms of a professional role. Switching jobs can often lead to certainly greater responsibilities, more authority, more seniority, but also importantly, and something I'm really passionate about, is more lucrative compensation packages, right? Which is really an opportunity for saving and investing. And I, advise clients, to make sure that they are thinking strategically about all of that, right? And sometimes, in families, it's not always, you know, um, it's not ideal necessarily, or one's not necessarily encouraged to kind of talk about money, right? And to talk about, is this enough money, or the compensation, or what one gets paid, right? In some families, it's considered really inappropriate. And I think there's a new way to think about compensation, which is, guide your children, right? Prepare, folks, young folks who are in college about what is enough, how to think about taxation and how much it matters, right? And it relates to something that I often talk to clients about, which is the character of the income. And is there a way to pivot from being only in an ordinary income compensation setup to one where it's a combination of both ordinary income and long-term capital gain, which is cheaper, right? And too much to get into to here, but what it comes down to is really just the importance of advice around the career and also around the compensation.
There's a huge need for that type of advice. I think, at least in my neighborhood and like growing up with my friends, I don't think we had those conversations with our parents. And so the more I get into some of these professional networks and the more conversations we have about it, there is a big need for it. And so thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing that, just that little blurb about it. I think if anybody wants to learn more too, like definitely follow Gail on LinkedIn. I think your posts are incredible. They
Thank
definitely
you.
touch a lot of points that people need to have conversations about. Um, so in terms of the last of the questions as well, from what I understand, Gail, you and your cohort, you and your colleagues, excuse me, have just started a program at Morgan Stanley called Access One. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about it?
Oh, sure. Thank you. So Access One is a initiative that was launched recently by Morgan Stanley, and it was started by a senior advisor and manager in New York. His name is James Walker, and he approached the firm really with a goal and being inspired for the firm to lead in a new and very different way. And Jim personally was inspired by the tragedy of George Floyd's killing, really as a moment for us to lead and to make a difference in the lives of Black employees at the firm. And so his ask to the firm was, let's pull together a cohort of Black investment advisors to pursue institutional asset management opportunities. And what it dovetails really nicely is this conversation that is happening all over corporate America about what it means to lead, for boards
Mhm.
to be more diverse, more inclusive, and importantly, for institutional assets, whether it's at the endowment level or at the foundation level, to be managed and in the hands of people of color. And if you look at the trajectory of wealth that has been stewarded by these institutions for decade after decade, in most circumstances, people of color, Black advisors, Black asset managers have been excluded. And there is a very robust conversation right now, really looking to just thread the needle around impact and what that impact means. And with Access One, the goal is to not only be in front of significant opportunities and to help and to assist these institutions, number one, but number two, to help mentor and inspire the next future generations of wealth advisors who will come behind me and my fellow 9 colleagues. So it's been really exciting to be part of this launch, and I'm really proud of what we've been able to pull together. And we've recently rolled this out, and we're in front of major leaders at this time. So it's really exciting. So thank you.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I'm so excited that you're part of this team. I look forward to hearing more about the successes of Access One and what your colleagues come up with. But it sounds incredible, and I hope more companies are taking note as you guys kind of trailblaze that opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna jump into the lightning round real quick as we're at.
Okay. All right.
So
Sounds good.
ask a few questions. Really light. Just want to hear some of your answers you might come up with. So hopefully I can throw you off a little bit. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So the first one we got here is, if you were having a dinner party and you can invite anyone you like, who would you invite and why?
That's easy. It would be James Baldwin.
Oh,
James
nice.
Baldwin left the US as an expat and went to Paris, and he had that just clairvoyant perspective of what he left behind, and really had the most clear view and was one of the most prolific writers about structural racism, and could see it write about it. And his writings are just beautiful. And if I had him at a dinner party, I'd want him to read out loud in his compendium of stories. I don't know if you've seen, I'm Not Your Negro. It just captures with such poignancy and clarity his life. And, I've read a number of his works, and they're just inspiring. And it would sadden me for him to see that not enough has changed since he's been gone. But I am inspired by his messages, and know that the work continues to be in front of us. So
Yes, that Netflix show series was amazing. So definitely, if you guys have an opportunity to, definitely check it out. I thought it was incredible. All right, so my second question is, you mentioned earlier that you're a board of directors at the San Francisco Symphony. What has been your favorite performance thus far?
My favorite performance of all times is Mendelssohn's Reformation Symphony, and that piece is beautiful. I performed it
I was going to say.
when I was, in high school, and in fact, I went on tour when I was 15 and went to the Caribbean and went to 9 different islands. And the important thing about that tour was 2 things. Both of my conductors were men of color. The first was a Japanese gentleman, Kent Nagano, and the second was Calvin Simmons, who was African American and was one of the most prolific young Black conductors ever. And what I didn't know was that as he conducted this Reformation Symphony, that it would be one of the last times that I ever saw him, because he sadly drowned shortly after this trip. But he really inspired some of the creative work that I've done. Thought he was just really a gift. I did an interview with him when I was, or about him, excuse me, right after that tour. And just really memorable. So Mendelssohn's Reformation Symphony is it.
Yeah. That's incredible, and your tour sounds even better. I mean, you're definitely living the life. I definitely want to be you when I grow up. During this whole quarantine, what have you been able to tap into?
That's a great question. So I'll say two things. One, I have and you're going to laugh, I'm sure, I have a very different and unexpected relationship with my dogs. I have two Portuguese water dogs. And as my kids will tell you, when they introduced me to TikTok, the thing that I gravitated to was the pictures of the dogs and how owners and their dogs could communicate. And I love my 2 dogs. They're great dogs, and most of the time they're right at my feet. They're downstairs or locked away, because otherwise we couldn't do this. But there is something quite special about spending, days and nights with these little creatures. And I didn't really appreciate them in quite the same way that I do now. So just really inspired. The second thing is I have 2 kids. I'm the proud mother of Mason and William, and they both came back from the East Coast and were here in March of last year and had the whole year. So it was an incredible gift. And there just wasn't a reason to keep really good wine locked in the basement, right? And so what did I tap into? Some really good wine. I had intended to save it for a little longer, especially for my kid who's of drinking age. I said, look, for you and for your friend, let's savor a little bit of this fine wine, because it just felt like, why save it? So that was really fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love some good wine. And I think the first time we had our conversation, you were with your dogs, getting them groomed. So this is hilarious. And the last question I got for you, and I ask this on every podcast show, but what is a music lyric or movie line that you live by?
One lyric, this is probably a movie line more than a lyric, is if anyone gives you a chance to let you see who they are, make sure you believe them. And it's a for me, just an incredible power and a powerful reminder of what it means to show up with one's full self, right, in beauty, and the incredible set of gifts that we all have. And we hope that everyone would lead with those gifts every single day. Um, and that just a reminder to kind of show up authentic, full, live the best version of yourself possible. And for me, it's a just a reminder and something that very inspired by. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's one of the best I've heard this season. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to take that note as well. Gail, can't thank you enough. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank,
I look forward to connecting with you soon.
thank you, Justin.